Hey folks, Mac T back, and I got some great news for you. I did some testing on some ultra low viscosity transmission fluids. That's right. If you have a 2019 plus vehicle from Ford, it more than likely has 8-speed or a 10-speed transmission. So the fluids have changed, and we used to use Mercon V, which was in the early gen Edge in the 6F50. Then about 2011 they bumped everything up to the Mercon ULV, low viscosity. And that was predominantly the transmission fluid for the 6F50 and the 6F35 all the way up through till 2018 was the last year that they used that. Just keep in mind the Mercon ULV was the primary one for the 6F50, 6F55, and the 6F35 transmissions. Yeah, pretty good to go. Then 2019 came the game change. They did the facelift and, as I like to say, the 2.5 update for the Ford Edge, and then they introduced a lot of other vehicles with 8-speed transmissions and 10-speed transmissions, including trucks. And the transmission fluid did change. Okay, so they went from the LV fluid to the ULV, ultra low viscosity fluid, and that is the history of all that. The transmissions did change from 2019. They went from the 6F35 to the 8F35. That's right, they didn't change the number on the end, but they did change the gears. So 8F35 in your 2019 Ford Edge, that's going to be primarily all of your lineup all the way up through the titanium. And then of course you then have the Sport, which is technically it is started out as a 8F57, and then I think now they have deleted, I think, second gear, and it is now an 8 get this, it is a 7F57. They've deleted one gear computer wise, not the physical gear, so it just sort of skips over that second gear, I guess, to give it a little bit more oomph when it takes off and shifts and everything else. But either way, it is still Mercon ULV fluid transmission. Now, unfortunately, when you got changes like this, it's going to increase the cost of the fluid. That's right. Earlier on, I tried searching when these first came out, and we found out that the ULV fluid was primarily a Motorcraft fluid. You could not find any other brand that made Mercon ULV. And I have ultimately found that, yes, my favorite, Valvoline, has finally started making Mercon ULV fluid, Ford spec'd, and of course can be used in your 8F35 and your 8F57/7. Okay, so yeah, Valvoline and Ford are the only two sources. Any other fluid that tries to say they are, yes, starts with an A, is purely marketing. They haven't done anything to change the viscosity of the fluid. They just said marketing, hey, yeah, we're good to go. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that part. I will do a later video on that. But right now, we're just going to compare the two fluids together. So let me go ahead and show you what they look like, and we'll get to the lab test results and the comparison about these two fluids and see where and how does Valvoline match up to the OE spec'd Motorcraft ULV. Now right here I have the Valvoline ULV transmission fluid. That's right. Right here we got it. Comes in 1-quart bottles. You can buy a case of 6, and they're not cheap. But this is the full synthetic ULV transmission fluid. And I do have the Motorcraft. That's right, the Motorcraft I have right here. And it is, I guess, the standard. Okay, and like I said before, earlier you could only get Motorcraft. You could not buy the Valvoline. But as it goes, Valvoline's not going to be left behind, so they're going to make their own fluid to meet Ford specs. And in case you guys really wanted to know what they got here, I can't really see, but they do state here that they do meet Ford, and it is includes the Ford GM Okay, this also works in the GM vehicles too, folks, because let me go back just a little bit on here to give you Ford and GM co-designed the 1080 the 10R80 transmission for the GMs, and then of course for the Fords. So if you buy a Ford truck or a GM truck, you're buying essentially a Ford GM transmission. They work together to build it, but Ford F-150s and Raptor trucks need Mercon ULV for those transmissions. So just keep that in mind, that their 9 and 10 speed transmissions need this ULV. Now they do meet the specs and all this other stuff on that, but you probably really want to know, and you'll follow along with me. I'll put it up over here, the actual lab test results. But overall, pretty much they start out with a 10, and one's got a better 10 than the other one does. I've been out in the sun a little bit longer, but I will tell you that, you know, as far as the 10 goes, one's got a higher number than the other, and we'll just go down through this. But basically on the Dexmerc ATF, the Valvoline brand, they say the predominant additives in this transmission oil are boron, calcium, and phosphorus. A couple parts per million of iron isn't anything too out of the ordinary, and isn't anything that would render the oil unfit for use. Traces and other elements are normal too. The 2.2 tan shows a pretty typical level of acidity starting out, and no moisture or solids turned up in the sample. The viscosity was on the lower end of the usual range for this type of fluid, but we wouldn't consider that to be a deal breaker, just something to note when sending in a used sample. The Ford one says the spectral results look good. No metals showed up in additives for a typical ATF. The viscosity is correct for ULV ATF, and no water solids are present. The tan shows little acidity at 1.0, and this oil should work great in its intended application. And that was the Motorcraft one. So when we're going down through the line and we're going to cover everything, basically what we're looking at down through both of them, all the way down till aluminum is 0, chromium is 0, and then we get to the iron, and the Valvoline has 2 parts per million iron in it. And then we get down to the copper. We have no copper in them. We have no lead in them. We have no tin. We have no molybdenum. We have no nickel. We have no manganese. We have no silver in it. We have no titanium in it. We have no potassium in it. The Mercon, the Mercon, as far as the Ford brand, has 85 parts per million of the boron, whereas the Valvoline has 288 parts per million of the boron. The silicon, the Ford brand has, Motorcraft brand has 4 parts per million, whereas the Valvoline has 3. Sodium, Ford has 0 sodium in its transmission fluid, and the sodium is at 6 parts per million for the Valvoline. Again, 2 different manufacturers, 2 real different ideas of what's going on. The calcium in the Motorcraft is 119 parts per million. Now keep in mind, calcium is a detergent, and the Valvoline has 258 parts per million for the calcium. Magnesium in the Motorcraft is at 4 parts per million, and the magnesium in the Valvoline is 9 parts per million. The phosphorus in the Motorcraft is at 330, and the phosphorus in the Valvoline is at 620 parts per million. The zinc is at 5 parts per million for the Motorcraft, and the zinc in the Valvoline is at 7 parts per million. And then of course no barium. Now we get to the really good part of all this, and that is the SUS viscosity. Now the The viscosity for the Motorcraft is at 41.2, which means it's a little bit lower than the Valvoline. The Valvoline comes in at a 42.3. Not much of a difference, but still a little bit of a difference. The viscosity, the CST viscosity for the Motorcraft comes in at 4.54. So, what does the Valvoline come in at? It comes in at 4.87. Now, we're splitting hairs here on these two viscosities, but they are very, very, very close. Now, Motorcraft comes in at 395 for a temperature, and the flash point is at that, and then the flash point for the Valvoline is 365. So we're talking 30-degree difference here on this one. But what we do get down to is the TAN, total acid number. The Motorcraft comes in at 1.0, whereas the Valvoline comes in at a 2.2. So the acidity level of the Valvoline is a tad bit higher on that aspect. But overall, we're not looking at too much difference, but then again, we have far more of the phosphorus in there, we have far more calcium in it, and we have far more boron in the Valvoline. So the Valvoline has upped their game on the additive side of the house for the fluid, which when you start doing additives, that can be a slight viscosity changer that goes into that as they add things to it. And then of course the oil's used and everything else. But overall, it looks like the if you want more additives running through your transmission, you're going to choose the Valvoline ULV vice the Motorcraft. That's all there is to that. But again, they did highlight the viscosities. They said we're a little bit out of range, but definitely not that far out of range as far as what we're going to. So I'm not gonna split hairs on that too much, other than the fact that I will probably use the Valvoline in my 2019 and continue on with what I've been using, which is always Valvoline for it. You can use a Ford. The Ford's perfectly serviceable. It just comes down to price at that point. What are you comfortable with price? And I'll put the cost down below in the description, because I forget what I paid for these, but yeah, they're not cheap. They're not cheap at all. So the cost of doing transmission fluid changes has definitely increased due to the cost of the fluids that they're using. So be prepared for that part of it. And I think one drain and fill on a 6F or 8F35 transmission is going to take less than 6 quarts. It probably only give you about 4 or 5 when you drain it, and it's a whole different principle. And once I get to that 30,000 mile mark, I will do a transmission fluid change video to show you how that's all done in the future. And I'm only about 9,000 miles away from that, so this summer I'll probably end up doing that as things go. But that's, hopefully it gives you some information on the fluids that you're using, and you can pick wisely on that. I pay for this stuff, so if you want to help donate to keep going with these types of things, in my YouTube channel you'll find the blue PayPal button. You can help donate, give me a little bit of money to help pay for all these, because you got to add up the cost of the fluid, the cost of the lab report, and everything else. For just these 2 tests, we're running probably about $100. That's right. So that's what it costs just to get the lab testing done and buy the product and everything else. So any little bit helps in that aspect. But hey, my feet hit the floor today. I'm having a great day, and I want you to have a great day too. And of course, Mercy Grill's got a couple one-liners. Band of One's always playing some great music, and we'll just be back on the next one.
Thank you for watching MACT's videos, and remember to like and subscribe. This is a Mercy Girl production.